It began quietly, a whisper from neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend. It started to spread. Protests broke out. Shouting began. People wanted the Shah to leave. They wanted a new leader. The majority wanted the exiled holy man, Ayatollah Khomeini, to lead their country, Iran, and do it the Muslim way.
I think my opinion on how the revolution, I think, happened was that, the government or the country needed some change. And I think the Shah was probably wanting to make some changes as the West advised Iran, and I think it came too soon, too fast for all that was happening.
In 1979, after many years of tension in Iran, Muslims and communists revolted against the government. The Shah was overthrown and Ayatollah Khomeini took power. Those who disagreed with the new Khomeini government reacted by fleeing the country for their lives. The U.S. government reacted in opposition to the new Iranian government. For those who stayed, the reforms enacted under the new regime were far more restrictive than those prior to the revolution. For those who fled, a different type of reform occurred in their lives. Beginning in the 1920s, the self-proclaimed Shah, Reza Pahlavi, changed the tradition-based country, Persia, into the oil-based country, Iran. An oil export-based economy created pressures for Iran to become more like the Western countries buying her oil. Through modernization, the Shah drastically changed the country by bringing in new innovations, such as movie theaters, telephones, and public transportation to Iran, and changing important cultural aspects of the country by de-emphasizing the role of religion. Under the Shah's rule, the first modern university was established. Women were encouraged to become educated, and many previously forbidden Western world aspects of culture, like fashion, were introduced to Iran. Under the Shah's rule, religious minorities found new protections as well. In 1941, the aging Shah was ousted from the throne, and his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, gained full power as Shah. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi continued to modernize Iran. At the beginning of his reign, he vowed to act as a constitutional monarch who would defer to the power of the parliamentary government. However, this new Shah was a cunning manipulator as well as a firm leader, and he gradually became more dictatorial. The Shah revived the army and created a secret police force called Savak. Savak became known for their harsh actions against any dissidents. Many Muslims had never felt comfortable with the rapid modernization and westernization of their country. They felt that much of their religious culture had been lost and longed for the days when Islamic culture played a bigger role in the daily decisions of the government. With the Shah ignoring their values, the Muslims, too, began to revolt. Ayatollah Khomeini had been exiled by the Shah in 1965 because of his leadership in Muslim anti-Shah government protests. He advocated for a reformed government based on Muslim values. When he was forced out of Iran by the Shah, he promised his supporters he would return. Even though Khomeini was exiled, his supporters grew in power on their political efforts to overthrowing the Shah. On January 16, 1979, after days of violent protests that Savak brutally but futilely attempted to control, the Shah left Iran on a vacation with his family. They would never return. Within hours, anti-Shah protesters tore down statues of the Shah all over Iran. On February 1st, Khomeini made a triumphant return to Iran. To the Shah's supporters, the 54-year Pahlavi dynasty brought law and order, discipline, central authority, and modern amenities, things some Muslims were against. Khomeini and his supporters wanted an Islamic government based on Muslim law, not Western influences. On February 11, 1979, the revolution officially began. Tanks rolled through the streets. Revolutionaries stormed Tehran's main radio station declaring, "This is the voice of the revolution of the Iranian people."
Going to school, we would have to go to school every morning, and after be there for 15 minutes, half an hour, or maybe the first period or something, and then the whole school would have to empty out to go and demonstrate in the streets. So I would try and cut and go home from a side street or something. Because, you know, sometimes it became violent as well, so just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So.
When the Shah left, his supporters, who were mostly religious minorities and secular educated Muslims, knew they were no longer safe in Iran. The religious minorities who were protected under the Shah were now exposed to the violent protests, who were targeting many non-Muslims and anyone who was against Khomeini and Islamic government.
So the way my husband and I left were a little bit different. We had decided to leave the country because we really felt very unsafe. There were two reasons. One primary was that we were minorities. And the second was that my husband was a physician, OBGYN, and it was just rumors that OBGYNs should not be men in Iran. And therefore, there was actually one obstetrician who was killed in the city that we used to live in, Hamadan. And we really decided that this was not a place for us and decided to leave the country, but that was not easy.
In the following weeks, those who supported the Shah fled or planned their escapes. Many of those who stayed were executed in the streets. Protests became more violent and many people were killed. Iran was no longer a safe place.
From each angle you look at it, especially at the time of revolution, and revolution was kind of new at the time, so, and I didn't have any immediate family there, but I had good friends and good Muslim friends that they helped me out.
2 months later, on April 1st, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini declared Iran an Islamic republic with a reformed constitution based on his ideals of Muslim law.
Once the revolution happened and this Islamic Republic government settled in, that was a very unsettling time for many Iranians who were living abroad.
Khomeini became supreme spiritual leader for Iran for life. The new constitution gave him a status above the law. Under the new constitution, strict social rules based on Islamic principles were instituted, and many people reacted in protest by ignoring them. Women's rights were severely curtailed. They could no longer dress like Westerners, nor associate with men who were not relatives. Many people were arrested, jailed, stoned to death, or even hung in the streets as a lesson to others. This was not the reformed government that the communists had hoped for. The communists had hoped for a new leader, but not a theocratic state. The revolution had consequences that they hadn't imagined. During the Iranian Revolution, U.S. President Jimmy Carter was a supporter of the Shah. The U.S. reacted to the Shah's exile by offering his family political refuge. Pro-Khomeinis concluded that the U.S. was not an ally of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Carter's handling of the 444-day Iranian hostage crisis and his tense relations with the new regime contributed to his failed bid for presidential re-election in 1980. Those who fled Iran had to completely recreate their lives in other places. Learning new cultures and languages was far from simple. The reforms that occurred in their personal lives were difficult and life-changing.
اگر همه چی اونجا از دست دادیم ولی خدا رو شکر اینجا دوباره به دست آورد.
She said, thank God if we lost everything back there and we left everything, we have been able to live very close to each other and have each other and actually to get the stuff and maybe more from what we had before.
The Iranian people placed great hopes in the possibility of a revolution. Many revolutionaries were hopeful for a reconstructed government based on Muslim values. They succeeded in exiling the Shah and bringing in a new leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, who reformed the Iranian government to Islamic values. In reaction, many Iranians fled their country, especially religious minorities, who then had drastically reformed their lives in new cultures, never to return to their homeland. Whether Iranians stayed or fled Iran, none of their lives would ever be the same.